The studio of the American Pulse was a cauldron of raw energy, its air crackling with the weight of an imminent clash. LED lights pulsed in rapid bursts of red, white, and blue, casting vibrant shadows across a packed audience buzzing with anticipation. At 8 p.m., cameras swept over a sea of faces, some clutching handmade signs reading Karoline for President or Gere for Compassion, others raising phones to livestream on X. The applause roared like a thunderstorm, heralding a showdown that had set social media ablaze for weeks. On one side stood Richard Gere, Hollywood's timeless romantic icon, whose roles in Pretty Woman and An Officer and a Gentleman had captivated generations. On the other, Karoline Leavitt, a 27-year-old conservative dynamo, the youngest White House press secretary in history, whose razor-sharp rhetoric had made her a political force. This wasn't a debate. It was a verbal duel, a collision of worlds. Hollywood's polished elite versus the unapologetic voice of a new generation. The host, James Carter, stepped onto the stage, his smile taut, as if he sensed the volatility of the night. "Welcome to the American Pulse," he declared, his voice booming over the cheering crowd. "Tonight, two ideals collide. Richard Gere, cinematic legend, versus Karoline Leavitt, America's youngest conservative star. Don't blink. The drama starts now." The studio lights dimmed, a single spotlight illuminating Carter at center stage. Before we dive in, comment below where you're watching from and subscribe to catch every second of this historic night, he said, gesturing to the cameras. The audience clapped with fervor, their cheers mingling with hushed whispers as all eyes turned to the opposing podiums. Gere stood tall, his meditative gaze sweeping the room, his silver hair glinting like a crown under the lights. Across from him, Leavitt adjusted her microphone, her posture poised, her eyes burning with the intensity of a warrior ready to strike. Carter raised his hands to quiet the crowd. "Tonight, we'll tackle the issues shaping America: compassion, media, policy, and more. Every voice matters. Let's begin." The audience erupted, but a tense silence followed as Gere stepped forward, his presence commanding, like an actor delivering the opening lines of a blockbuster. "Thank you for being here," Gere began, his voice warm and measured, as if reciting a script polished over decades. "I'm here to talk about hope, humanity, the world we can build together." The audience clapped eagerly, Hollywood supporters in the front row nodding, expecting the compassionate sermon Gere was known for at global charity events. Some raised phones to capture his words for Instagram and TikTok, ready to share his wisdom. But then his tone shifted, sharp and icy, like a blade unsheathed. "But how can we build hope when this country is led by those who parrot the words of a dictator? When a young woman, barely out of college, stands before the world to cover up the truth?" The room fell silent. Cameras swiveled to Leavitt, capturing the moment she tilted her head, her lips curling into a subtle, enigmatic smile. Gere continued, his voice now laced with biting sarcasm. "Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary, is the embodiment of failure. A 27-year-old girl, untested by the harsh realities of politics, tasked with polishing brutal policies. She's not a spokesperson. She's an actress, but this role is far too big for her." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few chuckles rose from Gere's supporters, emboldening him. He pointed at Leavitt, his eyes glinting with smug confidence. "She pops up on TikTok, posting sound bites as slick as toothpaste ads, and calls it communication. She flaunts her lace dress, sorry, made in China, as if it's a national triumph. Meanwhile, her administration tramples human rights, divides the country, and turns America into a global laughingstock. The audience's reaction was uneven. Hollywood fans clapped, but most of the room grew quiet, sensing the audacity of Gere's attack. Carter, sweat beading on his forehead, tried to interject. "Thank you, Mr. Gere, but—" Gere ignored him, his voice soaring like a climactic monologue. "I've traveled the world, stood with activists in Tibet, while Miss Leavitt was spinning fairy tales about condoms in Gaza. She doesn't represent America. She's a tool for a man who only knows how to shout into a microphone." Leavitt didn't flinch, her smile sharpening like a blade honed for battle. Whispers spread through the crowd. "Will she hit back?" Carter, nearly desperate, raised his voice. "Mr. Gere, we need to hear from Miss Leavitt." But Gere, basking in the spotlight, raised a hand. "I'm not done," he said, his tone dripping with theatrical drama. "America deserves more than a girl who follows orders. Leavitt is a symbol of collapse, a young generation manipulated by power and lies." Gere sat, tossing Leavitt a triumphant glance, as if she were a minor character in his story. The stage transformed into an arena, the spotlight beaming on Leavitt as she rose, microphone in hand, her eyes blazing like an unquenchable fire. The audience, swept up by Gere's scathing speech, fell silent, sensing a shift in the air. Carter, sweat glistening on his brow, stammered, "Miss Leavitt, would you like to respond?" Leavitt tilted her head, her lips curving into a sharp, unflinching smile. "I'll set the record straight," she said, her voice smooth but cutting, like a freshly sharpened blade. The crowd gasped. Phones raised to live stream the moment on X. The camera zoomed in, capturing every detail, from the way she brushed a strand of hair to the piercing glance she shot Gere. "Mr. Gere," she began, her tone measured but fierce, "you say I'm too young, just a girl unfit for the political stage. Let me remind you, youth isn't a weakness, it's a weapon." The audience erupted, especially the younger crowd in the back, their applause drowning out the show's background music. Gere furrowed his brow, his hand tightening on his chair, but Leavitt pressed on, stepping forward, the spotlight highlighting her commanding presence. "Youth is why I'm not stuck in outdated ruts," she continued. "At 27, I went from a White House intern to the youngest press secretary in American history. 4 days after giving birth, I stood before the nation, held a press conference, and defended President Trump under attack. You call that inexperience? I call it dedication." The audience exploded, cheers shaking the studio walls. Gere stood, his voice lowering, trying to regain control. "Miss Leavitt, dedication doesn't replace experience. Politics isn't a playground for those who follow orders. You're just a tool parroting someone else's words." Leavitt laughed, a short, sharp sound that silenced the crowd in anticipation. "A tool, Mr. Gere? If I'm a tool, what are you? An actor basking in the glory of last century's films, thinking a few trips to Tibet give you the right to judge America." She turned to the audience, her voice rising with conviction. "At 27, what were you doing, Mr. Gere? Chasing bit parts or meditating to escape reality? I'm facing the media, the world, to protect the American people." The applause thundered, a group of young fans chanting, "Karoline! Karoline!" The camera caught Gere pursing his lips, searching for a comeback. "You're deflecting," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Your youth is recklessness. You don't understand the responsibility of a spokesperson. Your words cause harm." Leavitt shook her head, her smile now laced with pity. "Harm, Mr. Gere? The American people are harmed by inflation, unsecured borders, failed policies that Hollywood elites like you never face. I'm young, but I understand what they need. What do you understand beyond preaching compassion from your million-dollar mansion?" She raised her hand, inviting the audience to answer. "Tell me, Mr. Gere, what did you do at 27 that gives you the right to call me naive?" The audience leaped to their feet, cheers shaking the studio. Gere opened his mouth, but his words were drowned out by the roar. Carter, nearly panicked, interjected, "We need to calm down." But Leavitt, eyes locked on Gere, pressed on. "My youth is my strength. I learned from President Trump, a man who never bows. What did you learn from your heartthrob roles besides how to act for the camera?" The camera caught Gere sitting, his eyes vacant, as if realizing he'd underestimated his opponent. Leavitt raised her microphone like a warrior hoisting a flag. "I'm not done," she said, her voice commanding. "Mr. Gere wants to talk about experience. Let me show him what real experience looks like." Carter, desperate to regain control, tried to pivot. "Let's move to compassion in politics. Mr. Gere, your thoughts?" Gere stood, smoothing his jacket, attempting to reclaim his Hollywood poise. His voice was low but sharp, like a tragic lead delivering a pivotal line. "Compassion is what America lacks, and Miss Leavitt, as the face of a ruthless administration, is proof of that absence." A few scattered claps rose from his supporters. He pointed at Leavitt, his voice rising with restrained fury. "I've spent decades fighting for human rights, from Tibet to refugee camps. I know compassion, but you justify divisive policies, deporting immigrants, ignoring the world's cries for help. You don't know compassion. You only follow orders from a man obsessed with money." The camera panned to Leavitt, capturing her slight lean forward, eyes burning like a warrior accepting a challenge. Carter stammered, "Miss Leavitt, would you like to respond?" Leavitt raised her hand, silencing him. "Compassion, Mr. Gere? Let me show you how real compassion differs from your Hollywood act." The audience gasped, applause spreading like wildfire. She stepped to the center, the spotlight highlighting her confident stance. "You brag about Tibet, but do you know Americans are struggling with skyrocketing gas prices? You talk about refugee camps, but have you visited towns bankrupted by illegal immigration? Or are you too busy at Malibu galas?" Gere tried to interrupt. "You're twisting my words. I've dedicated my life to the oppressed." But Leavitt cut him off, her voice slicing through the air like a knife. "The American people are the ones being crushed by inflation, crime, failed policies you never face. You call that compassion. I call it hypocrisy." The audience erupted, cheers echoing, especially from Trump supporters holding signs. Gere raised his voice. "You have no right to talk about morality. I've stood for freedom while you back an administration that shuts borders and abandons refugees." Leavitt's smile carried the force of a storm. "Freedom, Mr. Gere? You talk about freedom from your mansion while Americans lose jobs because of open borders. I stand before the world defending policies that bring jobs, security, a future for Americans. That's real compassion, not your edited compassion." Applause surged, the audience leaping to their feet. Gere tried to respond. "You don't understand compassion. You're just part of a political machine. Leavitt shook her head, her tone laced with pity. A machine, Mr. Gere? The real machine is Hollywood, where you live in a luxury bubble, preaching morality without knowing what Americans need. I may not have a mansion, but I have a heart for this country. The audience went wild, chanting her name. The camera caught Gere sitting, hands clenched, eyes vacant like an actor abandoned by his director. Leavitt raised her microphone, her voice commanding. If you want to talk compassion, start by listening to Americans, not taking photos in Tibet. Carter, sweating profusely, tried to shift gears. Let's discuss the media's role in politics. Mr. Gere? Gere stood, adjusting his tie, his voice bitter. The media is the foundation of truth, but Miss Leavitt has turned it into a circus, spreading misinformation to hide her administration's failures. He pointed at her, his voice rising like a prosecutor. You talk about condoms in Gaza, a fabricated story that made the world laugh. You post TikTok videos and call it information. That's not media. It's a scam. The camera panned to Leavitt, capturing her slight head tilt, lips curving into a sharp smile. Carter interjected, Miss Leavitt, would you like to? Leavitt raised her hand, her voice clear and powerful. Deceit, Mr. Gere? Let me show you how modern media outshines your outdated interviews. The audience erupted, applause rolling like a tidal wave. You call my TikTok videos a scam. I call them power. Last week, my speech on X got 2.3 million views, 500,000 shares. Do you have numbers like that? Or do you think media is sitting with a newspaper? Gere tried to interrupt. You're manipulating opinion. Those numbers aren't truth. They're polish. Leavitt laughed, a crisp sound like a gunshot. Real journalists, Mr. Gere? You mean biased papers? TV shows that edit your words to fit Hollywood's narrative. I answer directly on X. No editors, no scripts, to millions of Americans. The audience roared with laughter, a group holding a number sign Karoline Rules sign. Gere raised his voice. You spread misinformation. The Gaza story is proof. Leavitt shook her head, eyes glinting with mockery. Fabricated? I clarified the Gaza story with public documents on the White House website. Were you too busy watching CNN, where they never question your Malibu parties? The applause thundered. Gere tried to respond. You don't understand the media's responsibility. Leavitt raised her microphone, her voice a declaration of war. I create dialogue, speaking to the young generation in their language. 70% of people under 30 get news from social media, per Pew Research. Who do you speak to, besides aging fans of an officer and a gentleman? The audience went wild, shouting her name. The camera caught Gere sitting, hands clenched, eyes vacant. Leavitt continued, the media is connection, transparency, the power of truth witnessed by millions. I do that with 3 million followers on X. What do you have? A magazine interview no one reads. She paused, her voice low but commanding. If you want to understand the media, download TikTok, but don't mess up your hair. Carter, nearly fainting, tried to pivot. Let's talk policy. How do the administration's policies impact America? Gere stood, jacket rumpled, his voice desperate. Policy must serve people, but Miss Leavitt's administration is tearing apart America's soul. He pointed at her, trembling with fury. You justify mass deportations, border closures, trade wars that wreck the economy. You're the face of an administration that divides, abandons the vulnerable, puts personal gain above human rights. The camera panned to Leavitt, capturing her slight nod, eyes blazing. Carter stammered, "Miss Leavitt, do you—" Leavitt raised, her hand, her voice clear and powerful. "Deceit, Mr. Gere? Let me show you how modern media outshines your outdated interviews." The audience erupted, applause rolling like a tidal wave. "You call my TikTok videos a scam. I call them power." Last week, my speech on X got 2.3 million views, 500,000 shares. Do you have numbers like that? Or do you think media is sitting with a newspaper? Gere tried to interrupt. "You're manipulating opinion. Those numbers aren't truth. They're polish." Leavitt laughed, a crisp sound like a gunshot. "Real journalists, Mr. Gere? You mean biased papers, TV shows that edit your words to fit Hollywood's narrative?" I answered directly on X. No editors, no scripts, to millions of Americans. The audience roared with laughter, a group holding a number sign Karoline Rules sign. Gere raised his voice. "You spread misinformation. The Gaza story is proof." Leavitt shook her head, eyes glinting with mockery. "Fabricated? I clarified the Gaza story with public documents on the White House website. Were you too busy watching CNN, where they never question your Malibu parties?" The applause thundered. Gere tried to respond. "You don't understand the media's responsibility." Leavitt raised her microphone, her voice a declaration of war. "I create dialogue speaking to the young generation in their language. 70% of people under 30 get news from social media, per Pew Research. Who do you speak to, besides aging fans of an officer and a gentleman?" The audience went wild, shouting her name. The camera caught Gere sitting, hands clenched, eyes vacant. Leavitt continued, "The media is connection, transparency, the power of truth witnessed by millions. I do that with 3 million followers on X. What do you have? A magazine interview no one reads." She paused, her voice low but commanding. "If you want to understand the media, download TikTok, but don't mess up your hair." Carter, nearly fainting, tried to pivot. "Let's talk policy. How do the administration's policies impact America?" Gere stood, jacket rumpled, his voice desperate. "Policy must serve people, but Miss Leavitt's administration is tearing apart America's soul." He pointed at her, trembling with fury. "You justify mass deportations, border closures, trade wars that wreck the economy. You're the face of an administration that divides, abandons the vulnerable, puts personal gain above human rights." The camera panned to Leavitt, capturing her slight nod, eyes blazing. Carter stammered, "Miss Leavitt, do you—" Leavitt raised her hand, her voice ringing out. "Cruelty, Mr. Gere? You call protecting America cruelty. Let me show you how President Trump's policies are saving America." The audience erupted, applause roaring. "You criticize mass deportations. That's not division, it's security. Last year, 2.5 million illegal border crossings were recorded, per the Department of Homeland Security. Our policies cut that by 30%, bringing safety to families. You call that cruelty? I call it responsibility." Gere tried to interrupt. "You're destroying the American dream. Those immigrants seek freedom." Leavitt laughed, a sharp sound. "The American dream is jobs for citizens, not open borders letting criminals flood in. Thanks to Trump's policies, unemployment dropped to 3.8%, the lowest in a decade, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Got any numbers to counter that?" The audience roared with laughter, holding Trump 2024 signs. Gere raised his voice. "Trump's trade wars are killing the economy. Tariffs drive up prices. Leavitt shook her head, eyes glinting. Trade wars? That's a trade victory. Our tariffs brought in $80 billion in revenue, per the Department of Commerce, and forced China to negotiate fairly. We brought 500,000 manufacturing jobs back to Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Were you too busy rewatching Pretty Woman to catch the news? Gere tried to respond. You parrot Trump's numbers. Leavitt raised her microphone, her voice a verdict. Human rights? I understand the poor better than you. I grew up in a working-class family in New Hampshire, not a Hollywood mansion. My role is to communicate policies that help Americans. Tax cuts, job growth, border security. What do you do for the poor besides red carpet speeches? The audience went wild, shouting her name. Leavitt continued, Trump's policies are for America, and I'm proud to bring that message to millions. You call me a cover-up? I'm exposing the truth Hollywood elites like you never want to hear. She paused, her voice commanding. If you want to talk policy, come to the American people, not from the red carpet, from reality. The audience leaped to their feet, cheers roaring like a tsunami. Gere sat motionless, eyes lost like a forgotten legend. Carter, drenched in sweat, tried to wrap up. Thank you, Mr. Gere, Miss Leavitt. A night to remember. But no one listened, the crowd chanting Leavitt's name. Some Hollywood supporters quietly left, eyes dazed, as if their idol had crumbled. Gere stood silently exiting to the wings, offering no goodbye. Leavitt was mobbed by the crowd, reporters jostling for interviews, fans raising phones for photos. The stage was hers. As the broadcast cut to commercials, the battle exploded on X. Hashtags #Karoline wins and #Gere downed rocketed to global trending. A user posted, Karoline Leavitt just turned Richard Gere into a supporting actor in his own movie, with a clip of her final blow garnering 100,000 likes in an hour. A TikTok dance video with subtitles, When Karoline Knocks Out Gere Like a Superhero, hit 3 million views by dawn. Memes spread at lightning speed. One showed Gere with a sad face captioned, When you think you're a Buddhist, but a 27-year-old teaches you politics. Another cast Leavitt as Wonder Woman, wielding a microphone like a shield. Trump supporters dubbed her Queen of Clapbacks, suggesting she run for Senate. Fox News ran, Karoline Leavitt crushes Hollywood, a lesson for elites. CNN acknowledged her strength. Whether you agree or not, Leavitt dominated with rare confidence. MSNBC criticized her as Trump's aggressive mouthpiece, but admitted she outshone Gere. Hollywood stars jumped in. Jon Voight posted on X, Karoline Leavitt is America's true voice. Gere should listen before he speaks, earning 200,000 likes. Mark Ruffalo expressed disappointment. I respect Richard Gere, but this debate was a mistake. Leavitt turned it into her stage. President Trump posted, Karoline Leavitt silenced Hollywood. She's America's warrior, defending truth. Thank you, Karoline, with 1.2 million likes. Leavitt appeared on Tucker Carlson tonight, smiling radiantly. I didn't come to argue with Mr. Gere. I came to speak the truth. Americans deserve to hear what President Trump is doing. Asked about Gere, she said, I respect his career, but politics isn't a Hollywood movie. It needs reality. The interview garnered 5 million views, solidifying her status as a rising star. Gere faced a storm of criticism. Conservative media mocked him as a failed Buddhist, while fans on X expressed disappointment. I love Pretty Woman, But why did he dive into politics? Gere's progressive podcast interview, defending his stance, was overshadowed by Leavitt memes. A clip of his awkward moment hit 2 million views on TikTok. The online community blazed. College students launched the Karoline Challenge, urging young people to mimic Leavitt's takedowns with hashtag #RoastLikeCaroline. A 20-year-old's video, posing as Leavitt saying, "Mr. Gere, step out of your mansion first," racked up 1 million views. YouTube channels like Patriot Pulse called her Trump's secret weapon, while the Young Turks admitted she won the media game. Leavitt became an icon of the conservative movement, invited by Fox News, Newsmax, and political events in Texas and Florida. Commentators predicted a House run. On TikTok, videos praising her spread, one user writing, "Karoline didn't just beat Gere, she showed young conservatives' strength." Gere faced an image crisis, branded a has-been by conservative outlets. A Guardian journalist wrote, "Gere meant well, but he picked the wrong opponent. He withdrew from debates focusing on charity, but the shadow of defeat lingered. The clash ignited discussions about America's polarization." A Politico article noted, "Leavitt won over a generation seeking voices grounded in reality, not moral lectures." Leavitt posted on X, "Thank you, Mr. Gere, for giving me a chance to speak the truth. Wishing you peace, maybe in a new movie," with 1.5 million likes. Gere, from his Malibu mansion, perhaps gazed at the ocean, wondering what led him into Leavitt's arena. Karoline Leavitt rose from press secretary to invincible icon, turning a TV stage into a battlefield where she raised the flag of victory. Richard Gere, once a legend, stood as a faded shadow, his stardom extinguished by Leavitt's razor-sharp rounds. This wasn't just drama. It was a milestone, exposing the gap between political reality and red carpet illusions, etching the mark of a new generation ready to shape America's future.